All right, class, let's get going here with our next set of boards. Topic, Reformation, a huge turning point in European history. Essential question, how did the ideas from the Renaissance push the people towards Reformation, especially, pertaining to the Catholic Church? Causes of the Reformation: cities hurt the strength of the church, the clergy. The Babylonian captivity, the French hosted the Pope. Hosted here is in quotations because there was a time when the French kings kept the Pope in France, in Avion, and would not let him return to Rome, and that hurt the papacy. Reform movements of the church, all of these things were some of the causes of the Reformation. Now, corruption in the Catholic Church, one of the first problems they had was simonies, or sale of church offices. So when the church sold positions to people, it did not help the church in that manner. Sale of indulgences, paying church so that sins were absolved for you or for loved ones. So indulgences, you could get a certificate saying that your grandma or your parents were going to be in heaven if you paid a certain amount of money. You could also buy that for yourself. Moral decline of the papacy: 20% of priests had concubines in Trent in the early 1500s. Nepotism, favoring family members for church appointments. So all of these and many other reasons, the church was losing its power, and in addition to this, they were losing their credibility. Critics of the church, critics emphasized his personal relationship with God, no church. So you didn't need a priest or the church to be telling you what to do or how to do it. You could do it yourself. Aramis, in Praise of Folly, a book that he wrote, criticized corruption, saying Aramis laid the egg that Luther hatched. So Luther used some of Aramis's sayings and readings to help support him. Northern Christian humanists questioned the Latin Catholic Bible. So all of this, culmination, people questioning the church. We had a gentleman named Martin Luther, 1483 to 1546. He was a German monk who saw problems in the church. He was against Johann Tetzel for selling indulgences. Tetzel was a person that was local to where Luther was in Germany, and he did not like the way that he was selling indulgences and making money for the church. Luther then writes the 95 Theses that criticized the selling of indulgences and whether the Pope had the right to grant them. Put Pope in a bind. So that was in 1517. The printing press then circulated his writings. So the printing press greatly enhanced the amount of information that could get out about the Reformation, including Luther's works. 1518, the Pope orders Luther to stop. Luther only wishes to reform the Catholic Church. He didn't set about to create his own religion, Protestantism or Lutheranism. He just wanted to reform the Catholic Church. He was protected by a prince in Saxony in Germany. Luther debates Johann Eck, argues that salvation can be achieved by faith alone, no church. And this is taking the power away from the Catholic Church, so you can very well imagine the Pope did not like this. Luther then was excommunicated by Pope Leo X in 1520. Luther to stand trial at the Edict of Worms in the Holy Roman Empire. Charles V declares him a heretic. So at that time, if you were branded a heretic or you were found guilty in a court that the Pope had arranged, they would oftentimes execute you, burn you, or kill you. Frederick III, who was a prince in this area in Germany, kidnaps Luther to protect him. So Luther is taken. He doesn't stand trial at the Edict of Worms. Luther translates the Bible when he was in hiding, which profoundly influences the German language. Confessions of Augsburg in 1530, traditional statement of what the Lutherans believe. Now, the political battle of Lutheranism. Many German states in the north and Denmark, Sweden, turned to Lutheranism. They were far enough away from Rome, they didn't have as much influence from the Pope, and they started to turn to Lutheranism. Charles V of the Holy Roman Empire tried to put down Lutheranism and prevent the spreading of Protestantism. Now, the Peasant Revolt. Shortly after Luther was able to break from the church, there was a peasant revolt. The peasants had 12 articles. In 1525, they presented them. Peasants demanded an end to serfdom and oppression. The peasants and the serfs at this time had little of any rights whatsoever, and they saw Luther and how he went against the church. They fashioned their revolt or uprisal in the same way against the aristocracy of the time. Peasants used Luther's revolt against the church as a model to revolt against the upper class. Unfortunately for the peasants, they weren't very organized, they didn't have very good weapons, and they lost big time. Between 70,000 and 100,000 people died due to this peasant revolt. Now, the Peace of Augsburg in 1555, Charles V tried to put down the Protestants but lost and had to sign a treaty. It said that whoever is the ruler may decide the religion. So remember, in Germany there were many, many small kingdoms, many of them, with a prince that ruled. Now, Charles V tried to rule the whole area. He had limited power. This made Germany even more divided. So you'd have one small kingdom that was Protestant, and next to it would be Catholic, and so on and so forth. It made it very difficult. Now, the spread of Protestantism, the Anabaptists were an extreme group, even for Luther. They took Munster, which is in Germany. Protestants and Catholics combined together their forces to capture Munster and killed the leaders. Now, Anabaptists were the beginnings of, and their style of Protestantism were the beginning of the Mennonites, the Quakers, and the Unitarians. And that would, they would go on to be persecuted. And I believe Pennsylvania was a huge Quaker colony. So when these guys got persecuted in Europe, they said, forget you, and they went to North America. All right, now another one is Zwingli, 1484-1531, Swiss reformer, brought a theocracy to the area that he ruled and split from other Protestants. Remember, theocracy is when the religious leader is also the political leader. Now, someone who took this a step further was John Calvin, 1509-64. Calvin was a Frenchman exiled to Switzerland for his radical beliefs. He believed in predestination. Since God is all-knowing, he already knows who's going to heaven. So this idea of predestination is at the foremost of Calvinism. Calvin established a theocracy in Geneva in 1540, and this theocracy was very, very powerful. Geneva becomes a center for Reformation in Europe. Many exiles from other countries moved there. The Calvinism, most militant of the Protestants, they were very uncompromising. They didn't believe that they should have any kind of ties with the Catholic Church. Calvinism believed in hard work and financial success as a positive sign from God. So if you are a very hard worker and you are financially wealthy, then that means God is looking down on you in a positive way, and that you have a better chance of going to heaven. Now, some examples of Calvins that in other countries around Europe, you had the Huguenots in France, who were put down and persecuted quite a bit in France. And you also had the Puritans in England, and we know, oftentimes are reminded of the Puritans in England because they left and went to Massachusetts, and they have their start Thanksgiving from the Puritans. So this wraps up our Reformation. Remember, history is no mystery. Take good notes.